I still remember that moment like it happened yesterday. There I was, standing at the edge of the conference room, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. The simple task of introducing myself to a room of 20 colleagues felt more daunting than climbing Mount Everest. My mouth went dry, my palms grew sweaty, and when the moment came to speak, my voice betrayed me, cracking on the second syllable of my own name. Have you ever experienced something similar? That moment when your body seems to rebel against you in social situations? When your mind races with thoughts like, everyone is judging me, or, I am going to make a fool of myself. So you are not alone. Social anxiety affects millions of people, from the shy introvert who dreads small talk to the successful executive who panics before presentations. What if I told you that this anxiety is not a permanent condition but rather a habit? One that can be unlearned and replaced with genuine confidence. What if the very situations that now make you anxious could become opportunities to showcase your authentic self? The truth is, social confidence is not an innate trait that some lucky people are born with while others are doomed to awkwardness forever. It is a skill, one that can be developed systematically through understanding, practice, and the right strategies. And that is exactly what we are going to explore together. My own journey from socially anxious to comfortably confident took years of trial and error, research, and dedicated practice. But you do not have to take the long path I did. The insights and techniques I am about to share have helped thousands of my clients transform their social experiences, and they can work for you too. Think about it. How would your life change if you could walk into any room feeling calm and collected? How would your career advance if networking events energized rather than drained you? What relationships might blossom if fear no longer held you back from expressing your authentic self? The cost of social anxiety extends far beyond momentary discomfort. It limits career opportunities, restricts social connections, and prevents us from experiencing the richness of human interaction. But there is a way out, a path to genuine social confidence that does not require you to become someone you are not. Before we dive deeper, I want to be clear about something. The goal is not to eliminate all nervousness or to become the loudest person in every room. The goal is to develop a level of social comfort that allows your true personality to shine through, whatever that may be. Whether you are naturally reserved or outgoing, anxious or calm, the techniques we will explore are about becoming more authentically you in social settings. So what exactly makes some people appear effortlessly confident while others struggle with debilitating anxiety? Is it genetics, early childhood experiences, or perhaps something else entirely? The answer involves a fascinating interplay between our evolutionary past, our personal experiences, and, most importantly, our thought patterns. And it begins with understanding a critical psychological mechanism known as the social feedback loop. Imagine this scenario. Zachary Patel walks into his company's holiday party feeling slightly nervous. When he approaches a group of colleagues, he notices one person glance away just as he arrives. Instantly, Zachary's mind interprets this as rejection. They do not want me here. This thought triggers physical symptoms. His shoulders tense, his smile becomes forced, his conversation grows stilted. The group senses this awkwardness and naturally becomes less engaged. Zachary then perceives their reduced engagement as further evidence of his social inadequacy, which increases his anxiety, which further impacts his behavior, and the downward spiral continues. This is the social feedback loop in action. Our thoughts influence our physical state, which affects our behavior, which shapes how others respond to us, which then reinforces our original thoughts. For someone with social anxiety, this loop typically begins with a negative thought and ends with confirmation of that negative belief. But here is where it gets interesting. This same mechanism can work in reverse. By interrupting the loop at any point, changing our thoughts, adjusting our physical state, or modifying our behavior, we can transform a downward spiral into an upward one. This brings us to a crucial question. If changing this feedback loop is possible, why do so many of us remain trapped in patterns of social anxiety? What is happening in our brains that makes breaking free so challenging? To answer this, we need to understand that social anxiety is not just psychological. It is also deeply physiological. When we perceive a social threat, like potential judgment or rejection, Our body activates the same fight-or-flight response that protected our ancestors from predators. The amygdala, our brain's threat detection system, cannot distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and the prospect of public embarrassment. Both register as threats, triggering a cascade of stress hormones that prepare us for emergency action. These physical symptoms, racing heart, shallow breathing, muscle tension, then intensify our psychological discomfort, creating what psychologists call anxiety about anxiety. We begin to fear not just the social situation itself, but also our body's reaction to it. Melanie Oakes, one of my clients, described this phenomenon perfectly. I was not just afraid of stumbling over my words during presentations. I was terrified of having a visible panic attack. The fear of fear itself became bigger than my original anxiety. This brings us to a pivotal insight. To overcome social anxiety, we must address both its cognitive and physical dimensions simultaneously. We need strategies that calm the nervous system while also reframing the thoughts that trigger it in the first place. But what about those people who seem naturally confident? Are their brains simply wired differently? Research suggests that while there are indeed temperamental differences in how sensitive people are to social evaluation, the biggest difference between the socially confident and the socially anxious lies not in their natural dispositions but in their interpretation of social cues. Dr. Stephen Hoffman, director of the Psychotherapy and Emotion Research Laboratory at Boston University, found that socially anxious individuals are more likely to interpret ambiguous social cues negatively. For example, if someone looks distracted during a conversation, a socially anxious person might think, "I am boring them," while a confident person might think, "They must have a lot on their mind today." This difference in interpretation creates entirely different emotional experiences and leads to dramatically different behaviors, even when facing identical social situations. The question then becomes, how do we change these automatic interpretations that seem to happen below the level of conscious awareness? This brings us to our first major revelation, the power of metacognition, or thinking about our thinking. By developing the ability to observe our own thought patterns in social situations, we gain the power to challenge and ultimately change them. Consider this: most of our anxious thoughts are not facts but interpretations. "Everyone is judging me" is not a reality but a hypothesis, and often an inaccurate one. By learning to recognize these thoughts as mental events rather than absolute truths, we create space between stimulus and response, between social trigger and anxious reaction. This space is where our freedom from social anxiety begins. But recognizing anxious thoughts is just the beginning. We must also understand the specific cognitive distortions that fuel social anxiety, the mental filters and biases that consistently lead us astray in social situations. Psychologist David Burns identified several cognitive distortions commonly found in those with social anxiety. 3 of the most powerful are: 1. Mind reading, assuming we know what others are thinking, almost always assuming they are thinking negatively about us. 2. Catastrophizing, imagining the worst possible outcome of a social situation and treating it as likely or inevitable. 3. Personalization, interpreting everything in relation to ourselves, such as assuming someone's bad mood is a reaction to something we did. These distortions act like malware in our mental operating system, corrupting our perception of social reality and triggering anxiety responses even when there is no genuine threat. Take mind reading, for example. In a study at Stanford University, researchers asked socially anxious and non-anxious participants to estimate how negatively others would evaluate them after a brief conversation. The socially anxious group consistently predicted much harsher judgments than they actually received. In fact, their conversation partners often rated them quite positively, a reality completely at odds with their anxious predictions. This reveals something profound. Much of our social anxiety is based not on actual social experiences but on inaccurate predictions about those experiences. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. This insight leads us to a powerful question. What if we could train ourselves to make more accurate predictions about social interactions? What if we could update our mental models to align more closely with reality? The process of recalibrating these predictions forms the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, one of the most well-validated approaches to treating social anxiety. At its core, CBT involves identifying distorted thoughts, challenging them with evidence, and gradually replacing them with more realistic assessments. For instance, instead of thinking, "If I speak up in this meeting, everyone will think I am stupid," we might reframe to, "People generally focus on their own contributions. Even if I say something imperfectly, most people will either not notice or quickly forget about it." But here is where many traditional approaches fall short. Mere intellectual understanding of our cognitive distortions is rarely enough to create lasting change. This is because social anxiety operates on multiple levels simultaneously: cognitive, physical, and behavioral. To truly transform our social experience, we need an integrated approach that addresses all these dimensions. And this brings us to the Confidence Triad, a comprehensive framework for building social confidence from the inside out. The Confidence Triad consists of 3 interconnected elements: mindset, embodiment, and skill set. Think of them as the 3 legs of a stool, each essential for stable, authentic confidence in social situations. Mindset encompasses our thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations about social situations. Embodiment refers to our physical state, how we use our body, breath, and voice to either fuel anxiety or cultivate calm. Skill set involves the practical communication and connection techniques that help us navigate social interactions effectively. When all 3 elements work together, they create a powerful upward spiral of social confidence. A more resourceful mindset leads to a more relaxed body, which enables more effective social skills, which generate positive responses from others, which reinforce our confident mindset, and the virtuous cycle continues. Let us explore each element more deeply, beginning with mindset. The anxious mind is characterized by what psychologists call hypervigilance, an excessive focus on potential social threats. Like a security guard watching dozens of monitors simultaneously, the socially anxious person scans continuously for signs of rejection, judgment, or disapproval. This hypervigilance consumes enormous mental bandwidth, making it difficult to be present in conversations or to access our natural social abilities. It is like trying to drive while constantly checking all mirrors and blind spots, so focused on avoiding an accident that we cannot enjoy the journey. The confident mindset, by contrast, is characterized by present moment awareness and a focus on connection rather than protection. Instead of monitoring for threats, the confident person attends to the conversation itself, the other person's words, and the potential for meaningful exchange. How do we shift from hypervigilance to present-centered awareness? One powerful approach comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, which introduces the concept of cognitive diffusion, the practice of creating distance between ourselves and our thoughts. Instead of being caught up in anxious thinking, "I am making a fool of myself," we learn to observe these thoughts with curiosity. "I notice I am having the thought that I might be making a fool of myself." This subtle but powerful shift changes our relationship with anxious thoughts, reducing their emotional impact and their control over our behavior. Another mindset shift involves moving from performance to presence. Many socially anxious people approach interactions as performances to be evaluated rather than connections to be experienced. This performance orientation keeps us self-focused and hyper-aware of potential mistakes. Zane Pressman, a tech entrepreneur I worked with, described his breakthrough moment. "For years, I approached networking events like job interviews, trying to impress everyone and constantly evaluating my own performance. When I finally shifted to genuine curiosity about the people I was meeting, everything changed. Not only did my anxiety decrease, but my connections became more authentic and valuable." This shift from performance to presence involves a fundamental question. What if the goal of social interaction is not to be evaluated positively but to connect authentically? Research supports this approach. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that participants who focused on being authentic in conversations were rated as more likable and made better impressions than those who focused on managing others' impressions of them. Paradoxically, trying less hard to be liked often makes us more likable. But mindset shifts alone, while powerful, are not enough. This brings us to the second element of the Confidence Triad: embodiment. Our bodies and minds exist in a continuous feedback loop. Anxious thoughts trigger physical tension, which reinforces anxious thinking. To interrupt this cycle, we need practical tools for regulating our physical state in social situations. The most immediate and powerful of these tools is conscious breathing. When anxiety activates our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, our breathing typically becomes shallow and rapid. By deliberately slowing and deepening our breath, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, our body's natural calming mechanism. A technique I teach clients called the 4-7-8 breath can shift your physiological state in under a minute. Inhale for a count of 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. Practicing this before and during social situations creates a foundation of physical calm from which confidence can emerge. Equally important is our physical posture. Social psychologist Amy Cuddy's research on power posing demonstrates that adopting expansive, open postures increases testosterone, associated with confidence, and decreases cortisol, associated with stress. While the biochemical findings have been debated, the psychological impact of posture is well established. How we hold our bodies influences how we feel and how others perceive us. Try this experiment. Sit or stand with your shoulders rounded, head down, making yourself small. Notice how this affects your emotional state and thought patterns. Then shift to an open, expansive posture, shoulders back, chest open, taking up appropriate space. Notice the difference in how you feel and the thoughts that arise. Morgan Oberstein, a marketing director who struggled with presentation anxiety, shared how embodiment practices transformed her experience. I used to rush through presentations, my voice high and strained. Learning to ground myself physically, feet firmly planted, breath deep, voice resonant, changed everything. Now my presentations land with an authority I never knew I had. Voice modulation is another critical aspect of embodiment. Anxiety often shows up in the voice as high pitch, rapid pace, or vocal fry, a creaky sound at the end of sentences. Practicing speaking from the diaphragm rather than the throat not only projects confidence but actually generates it through physical feedback. These embodiment practices are not about faking confidence, but about interrupting the physical patterns that perpetuate anxiety and establishing new patterns that support genuine confidence. The body leads and the mind follows. Now let us turn to the third element of the Confidence Triad. Skill set. The practical social techniques that help us connect effectively with others. Even with a confident mindset and regulated physical state, we still need concrete skills for navigating social interactions. These skills create a structure that supports confidence, especially when we are still developing our internal resources. One foundational skill is effective question asking. Most anxious people either ask too few questions because they are caught up in their own thoughts, or pepper others with closed questions that lead nowhere. Learning to ask open, thoughtful questions not only takes pressure off us to perform but genuinely engages others. Consider the difference between, "Did you have a good weekend?" Closed, and "What was the highlight of your weekend?" Open. The first can be answered with a simple yes or no, potentially deadening the conversation. The second invites elaboration and reveals something meaningful about the person. Active listening is equally crucial. Social anxiety often makes it difficult to stay present in conversations because our attention is divided between the interaction and our own anxious thoughts. Practicing specific listening techniques, such as summarizing what you have heard before responding or noting keywords to return to, creates both connection and confidence. Another invaluable skill is what I call conversational bridging. The ability to transition smoothly between topics without awkward pauses or abrupt shifts. This involves listening for hook points in other statements that can be developed into new conversational directions. For example, if someone mentions they just returned from Colorado, hook points might include Colorado itself, the concept of travel, the specific activities they did there, or how long they were away. Each hook point offers a potential bridge to deepen or shift the conversation naturally. Zachary Patel, an engineer who described himself as conversationally challenged, found this concept transformative. Before learning about hook points, my conversations felt like a series of disconnected topics. Now I listen for these natural connection points, and conversations flow effortlessly. I no longer worry about what to say next because I know there are always hooks available if I listen for them. Perhaps the most powerful social skill is vulnerability calibration. knowing how and when to share personal information to create authentic connection. Research by social psychologist Arthur Aaron demonstrates that gradual, reciprocal self-disclosure builds rapport and intimacy more effectively than either complete guardedness or premature oversharing. The key is progressive vulnerability, starting with lower-risk disclosures and gradually increasing depth as trust builds. This might mean sharing a minor challenge you are facing before revealing bigger struggles, or expressing a mild preference before disclosing deeper values. What makes these skills so powerful is that they focus our attention outward rather than inward. When we are actively listening for hook points or thoughtfully calibrating our vulnerability, we have less cognitive bandwidth available for anxious self-focus. The skills themselves help break the cycle of social anxiety. Now that we understand the Confidence Triad conceptually, let us explore how to integrate these elements into practical strategies for specific social situations, beginning with one of the most common anxiety triggers: group conversations. Group dynamics present unique challenges for the socially anxious. The presence of multiple people can amplify self-consciousness and create uncertainty about when and how to contribute. Many anxious people either withdraw completely or force themselves to speak, then overthink every word. The key to navigating group conversations confidently lies in understanding the rhythms of group interaction and finding your authentic entry points. Rather than trying to dominate, which rarely feels authentic for the socially anxious, or disappearing, which reinforces anxiety, aim for meaningful, well-timed contributions. One effective approach is the observe before engaging technique. Take the first few minutes in a new group to simply listen and notice the conversation patterns. Who speaks the most? Who asks questions? What is the pace and tone of the interaction? This observation period calms your nervous system while providing valuable information about how to engage effectively. When you do speak, use the quality over quantity principle. One thoughtful comment or question contributes more than several rushed or forced remarks. Remember that in group settings, most people are more concerned with being heard themselves than judging your contributions. Maria Ortiz, a financial analyst who once dreaded team meetings, discovered that preparation could transform her experience. I started jotting down 1 or 2 points before meetings, things I genuinely wanted to contribute. Having these ready reduced my anxiety about finding something to say, and I could focus on choosing the right moment rather than generating content under pressure. For one-on-one conversations, different strategies apply. Here, the main anxiety often stems from pressure to keep the conversation going and avoid awkward silences. The irony is that this very pressure creates the stilted interactions anxious people fear. A paradigm shift I teach clients is to view conversation not as a performance but as a collaborative creation, like a game of catch rather than a solo juggling act. This perspective takes enormous pressure off because responsibility for the conversation's success is shared. Practically speaking, this means prioritizing quality of attention over quality of expression. Being fully present with someone, truly listening rather than planning your next brilliant remark, creates more connection than any clever statement could. It also helps to remember that so-called awkward silences are often only awkward because we label them as such. A brief pause in conversation can be reframed as a thoughtful moment, a chance to breathe, or simply a natural rhythm in human interaction. For those who struggle with larger networking events or parties, different challenges arise. The unstructured nature of these gatherings can trigger anxiety about finding conversation partners, gracefully entering and exiting discussions, or justifying your presence. One practical strategy is the host mindset. Approaching the event as if you were its host, responsible for making others feel comfortable, rather than a guest worried about your own comfort. This mental shift focuses your attention outward and gives you a clear purpose: connecting people, asking engaging questions, and ensuring others feel included. The physical environment at such events also matters. Standing near natural gathering points, food tables, bar areas, entrances, increases the likelihood of organic interactions. Positioning yourself at the edge of a conversational circle rather than directly opposite the speaker makes it easier to join unobtrusively. Perhaps most importantly, set realistic goals for networking events. Quality always trumps quantity. One meaningful connection will serve you better than 10 business cards from people who will not remember you. This takes enormous pressure off the experience and allows more authentic engagement. Now let us address one of the most anxiety-provoking social scenarios: public speaking or presenting to groups. The fear of public speaking consistently ranks among people's top fears, sometimes even above the fear of death. This intense anxiety stems from the vulnerability of being evaluated by multiple people simultaneously, with perceived high stakes for our social status and professional identity. While comprehensive public speaking training goes beyond our scope here, several principles from the Confidence Triad apply powerfully to presentation settings. From a mindset perspective, reframing is essential. Instead of seeing the audience as evaluators, view them as people seeking value, connection, or understanding. They want you to succeed because your success serves their needs. This shift from "they are judging me" to "they are rooting for me" can transform your emotional experience. Physiologically, presentations require special attention to embodiment practices. The 5-5-5 reset works well here. Before speaking, take 5 deep breaths, identify 5 things you can see in the room, and recall 5 reasons you care about your topic. This grounding technique engages multiple sensory channels to interrupt the anxiety response. Skill-wise, preparation is crucial but often misunderstood. Many anxious presenters over-prepare content while under-preparing delivery. Practice the first 60 seconds of your presentation until it becomes automatic, as beginning strongly creates momentum that carries through anxiety. Also, build interaction points into your presentation: questions, brief discussions, even simple show-of-hands moments, to transform a monologue into a dialogue. Maggie Olson, a department director who once experienced panic attacks before presentations, shared her transformation. "I stopped trying to memorize every word and focused instead on knowing my material well enough to have a conversation about it. I also learned to pause and breathe between key points. Now my presentations feel like elevated conversations rather than performances, and my anxiety has decreased dramatically." Dating and romantic interactions represent another arena where social anxiety often appears in concentrated form. The higher perceived stakes and potential for rejection can amplify our insecurities and trigger intense anxiety responses. The mindset shift most needed in dating contexts involves moving from outcome focus to process focus. When we are fixated on getting a second date or making the right impression, we create immense performance pressure. By refocusing on simply being present and discovering compatibility, we reduce anxiety and paradoxically increase our attractiveness. From an embodiment perspective, dating situations benefit from preemptive regulation practices. Taking a few minutes before a date to practice deep breathing, power posing, or even progressive muscle relaxation can establish a physiological foundation of calm that carries into the interaction. Skill-wise, vulnerability calibration becomes especially important in romantic contexts. Sharing too little creates distance, while sharing too much too soon can overwhelm. The key is progressive disclosure that matches or slightly exceeds your date's level of openness, creating a gradually deepening connection that feels both safe and exciting. Workplace interactions present their own unique challenges, particularly when navigating relationships with superiors or managing team dynamics. The power dimensions and professional stakes can heighten anxiety even for those who feel comfortable in other social settings. In these contexts, preparation becomes a powerful anxiety management tool. Before important meetings or conversations with supervisors, the 3 Ps strategy can be helpful. 1. Purpose. Clearly define what you hope to accomplish. 2. Points. Identify 2 to 3 key points you want to communicate. 3. Possible responses. Anticipate likely reactions and consider how you might address them. This structured preparation reduces cognitive load during the interaction itself, freeing up mental bandwidth for present-moment awareness rather than anxious rumination. For ongoing workplace relationships, the concept of social capital provides a useful framework. By consistently making small positive contributions to relationships, offering help, acknowledging others' contributions, showing authentic interest, we build reservoirs of goodwill that reduce anxiety about occasional social missteps. As we consider all these different social contexts, a pattern emerges. Regardless of the specific situation, confidence comes from a combination of internal regulation and external skill application. Neither alone is sufficient. We need both the inner resources to manage our anxiety and the outer capabilities to engage effectively. This brings us to perhaps the most important question. How do we integrate these strategies into a sustainable practice that creates lasting change? The answer lies in systematic skill building through graduated exposure. Like building physical strength, developing social confidence requires progressive challenges that stretch our comfort zone without overwhelming our resources. This approach, known as systematic desensitization in clinical settings, involves creating a personalized social confidence ladder, a sequence of increasingly challenging social situations that you commit to engaging with regularly. The key is to start with situations that generate mild anxiety, perhaps a brief interaction with a familiar cashier, before progressing to moderately challenging scenarios, joining a conversation at work, and eventually to situations that currently provoke intense anxiety, speaking at a large meeting. By pairing each exposure with the mindset, embodiment, and skill set techniques we have explored, you systematically build both confidence and competence. Each successful interaction becomes evidence that contradicts your anxious beliefs, gradually rewiring your social expectations. Zachary Patel described his experience with this approach. I created a 10-rung ladder of social challenges, from making small talk with the barista to initiating conversations at industry events. What amazed me was how quickly my comfort zone expanded. Situations that once seemed terrifying became routine, and I found myself taking on challenges I would never have imagined possible before. The power of this progressive approach lies in its respect for the nervous system. Rather than flooding yourself with anxiety through immediate high-stakes challenges, graduated exposure allows your nervous system to recalibrate gradually, building new neural pathways associated with social comfort rather than fear. As you work through your social confidence ladder, two complementary practices accelerate your progress: reflection and reinforcement. Reflection involves reviewing your social experiences with curiosity rather than judgment. After an interaction, ask questions like, what went better than expected? What did I learn that could help me next time? And what strengths did I demonstrate? This reflective practice counteracts our natural negativity bias, which typically focuses on what went wrong rather than what went right. Reinforcement involves deliberately acknowledging and celebrating your progress. Our brains are wired to normalize improvements quickly, making it easy to miss how far we have come. By regularly recognizing your growth, perhaps through journaling, conversations with a supportive friend, or simple personal acknowledgement, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with social confidence. As powerful as these practices are, implementing them consistently requires addressing a common obstacle: perfectionism. Many socially anxious people hold themselves to impossible standards in social situations, creating a setup for perpetual disappointment. The antidote to social perfectionism is what I call excellence with humanity, striving for meaningful connection while accepting the natural imperfections of human interaction. This means embracing occasional awkward moments, missed conversational opportunities, or imperfectly expressed thoughts as part of the rich texture of authentic relationship rather than failures to be avoided at all costs. Morgan Oberstein reflected on this shift. I used to mentally replay conversations for days, agonizing over everything I should have said differently. Learning to embrace imperfection was liberating. Now I aim for connection rather than perfection, and ironically, my conversations have improved dramatically. This brings us to a powerful truth about social confidence. It is not the absence of awkwardness, but the ability to move through awkward moments with grace. Everyone, even the most socially skilled, experiences conversational lulls, says things they later question, or misreads social cues occasionally. The difference is that confident people view these moments as temporary and situational rather than reflections of their social worth. As we approach the conclusion of our exploration, let us return to where we began, the social feedback loop that either perpetuates anxiety or builds confidence. The strategies and insights we have discussed all serve one ultimate purpose: transforming this loop from a vicious cycle of anxiety to a virtuous cycle of growing confidence. When we combine mindset shifts that challenge distorted thinking, embodiment practices that regulate our physiological state, and skill set development that improves our actual social effectiveness, we create multiple entry points for interrupting the anxiety cycle. Each small success builds evidence for a new, more confident self-concept, which in turn makes the next interaction easier. Over time, this creates what psychologists call upward spirals, self-reinforcing cycles of positive emotion, effective behavior, and supportive responses from others. These spirals build momentum, making social confidence increasingly natural and requiring less conscious effort to maintain. The most beautiful aspect of this transformation is that it allows your authentic self to emerge. True confidence is not about becoming someone else or adopting a social persona that feels foreign. It is about removing the obstacles, anxiety, self-consciousness, limiting beliefs that prevent your natural warmth, intelligence, and unique perspective from shining through. Zane Pressman captured this perfectly. For years I thought becoming confident meant becoming extroverted or aggressive, qualities that never felt authentic to me. What I discovered instead was that confidence meant becoming more fully myself in social situations. My thoughtful nature and dry humor, once hidden behind anxiety, became strengths rather than limitations. This insight points to perhaps the most important principle of all. Authentic confidence is self-expression, not self-promotion. Comes not from proving your value to others, but from embodying your values with others. As we conclude, I want to offer one final, immediately applicable technique that integrates all three elements of the Confidence Triad. I call it the connection reset, and you can use it in any social situation where anxiety begins to rise. First, pause and take 3 deep breaths, focusing on the sensation of air entering and leaving your body. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calming your physical state, embodiment. Next, silently remind yourself, this person is just human, like me. We both want connection and respect. This shifts your focus from evaluation to shared humanity, mindset. Finally, ask yourself, what am I genuinely curious about with this person? Then direct the conversation toward that authentic interest, skill set. This simple 3-step process, practiced regularly, can interrupt anxiety spirals and reset your social experience in less than 30 seconds. It embodies the essence of the approach we have explored, using integrated strategies to shift from anxiety to authentic connection. The journey to social confidence is not always linear. There will be setbacks and challenging days alongside breakthroughs and moments of surprising ease. The key is persistence, self-compassion, and a willingness to prioritize growth over comfort. Remember that every confident person you admire was once a beginner. What appears as natural social grace in others is often the result of thousands of interactions, countless moments of pushing through discomfort, and deliberate practice of the very skills we have discussed. Your path to confidence begins with a single conversation, a single moment of choosing presence over performance, curiosity over self-consciousness, connection over protection. With each such choice, you weaken the hold of anxiety and strengthen your capacity for authentic engagement. The world needs your voice, your perspective, your unique presence. By developing the confidence to share these gifts fully, you not only transform your own experience, but enrich the lives of everyone you encounter. So take that next step on your social confidence ladder, whatever it may be. Apply the mindset shifts, embodiment practices, and social skills we have explored. Reflect on your progress, celebrate your growth, and remember that becoming confidently you is not just possible. It is inevitable when you combine the right approaches with consistent practice. The journey from social anxiety to authentic confidence is ultimately a journey home to yourself, to the natural expression of who you are, unhindered by fear. It is available to you starting now, one interaction at a time. True confidence emerges not from eliminating all social fears, but from building the capacity to act with authenticity, even when those fears arise, transforming moments of potential anxiety into opportunities for genuine human connection.